Welcome in, everybody, to another deep dive. You know how much we love to unpack those philosophical ideas that are lurking behind the headlines. Well, today, we've got a whole stack of news and blog posts that do just that.
I know, I'm excited. It's always fascinating to see how those big philosophical questions pop up in the most unexpected places. Like, who knew we'd be talking about 3D printed guns alongside AI consciousness?
It's a wild world out there. So let's dive right into one that really caught my eye. It's from On Philosophical, and they call it Exploring Post-Truth.
Yeah, that one's a doozy. They actually sat down with a professor, Cyan Day, to dissect this whole idea of a post-truth society.
Which feels, I don't know, maybe a little too real these days.
Right, it's like everywhere you turn, it's fake news this and alternative facts that. And the podcast really digs into how we got here, how feelings and personal beliefs seem to be trumping, no pun intended, actual objective facts.
Okay, but is that really new, though? Haven't people always been swayed by emotion?
I mean, sure, but the podcast points to far-right populism as a kind of a, I don't know, accelerant to this whole thing. And they get into how dangerous this can be, like when folks straight up reject science or history.
Yeah, that's scary. I mean, dismissing the truth, that can lead to some serious conflict, even violence.
Absolutely. So this whole thing really underscores, like, how crucial critical thinking is. And being media literate, right? Not just gobbling up whatever's thrown at you online.
Which is so hard these days, right?
Yeah.
Like, how are you even supposed to sift through it all and figure out what's actually reliable?
It's a great question, and honestly, there's no easy answer. But I think one thing we can all do is try to be more aware of our own biases. You know, what are we predisposed to believe? And then actively seek out different perspectives. Like, don't just stay in your echo chamber.
That's good advice. Okay, so let's shift gears a bit. From the digital world to something a little more, well, tangible. We've got a blog post from a philosopher's blog called Printing Guns, once again.
That one got people talking. I mean, 3D printed guns, that's some real sci-fi stuff coming to life.
And it brings up a whole tangle of ethical issues way beyond your typical gun control debate. Like, on the one hand, you have people saying, hey, it's my right to protect myself. But then on the other, you've got, like, untraceable weapons. That's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, for sure. And the blog post does a great job of laying out this tension between individual rights and, the safety of society as a whole. It's not an easy one to untangle.
So walk us through it. What are the strongest arguments on each side of this? What makes this so tricky?
Okay, so for the folks who are pro 3D printed guns, the big thing is self-reliance.
Right.
They're like, I have the right to defend myself and my family, and this technology gives me the power to do that, regardless of what the government says.
I can see that.
And they also make the point that criminals are going to get guns no matter what. Laws only stop law-abiding citizens.
Okay, what about the other side?
So opponents, their big worry is, well, untraceable firearms, obviously, and just the sheer accessibility of it. Like, if anyone can print a gun at home, that's a recipe for disaster, they say. And it also makes it way harder to enforce any kind of gun control laws.
It's a tough one. No easy answers there.
Nope, not at all. And it shows just how nuanced this whole thing is. Like, we're talking about fundamental rights, but also about keeping people safe.
Speaking of tricky questions, let's stick with a philosopher's blog for a minute. They got another post called Intelligence in Leadership, and it takes us all the way back to Plato.
Ah, yes, the Philosopher King. Always a fun one.
So just to refresh everyone's memory, Plato basically argued that the most intelligent, the wisest people, those are the ones who should be running the show.
Imagine a world ruled by philosophy professors. Wild, right?
I mean, I like the idea in theory, but would it actually work in practice? Like, does a deep understanding of philosophy actually translate into good leadership?
That's the million-dollar question. Plato thought so, of course. But this blog post, it kind of pushes us to think beyond that. Like, maybe intelligence isn't the be-all and end-all of leadership.
Right. Like, what about things like empathy or being able to inspire people or just, getting stuff done?
Exactly. It's complex. I mean, think about the leaders you really admire. Are they all just like super brains? Or is there something more to it?
Yeah, that's true. It's like you need that balance, right? Brains plus heart plus the know-how to actually make things happen.
I think so. Leadership's not a one-size-fits-all kind of deal. Okay, so ready for something completely different?
Always.
Okay, good. So let's talk about artificial intelligence, specifically the possibility of creating artificial consciousness.
Ooh, getting philosophical now.
Right. And the ethics blog has this piece. It's called Conceivability and Feasibility of Artificial Consciousness. And it really gets into the weeds on this one. Like, can we actually do it? And if so, should we?
Okay, so break it down for me. Where's the line between sci-fi and reality here?
Well, I mean, think about it. AI is already doing stuff that, like, 10 years ago we thought was impossible. So who knows what's next? And the blog post, it lays out these different schools of thought. Like, some people think consciousness is just a byproduct of complex systems. So in theory, if we can build a system complex enough, boom, artificial consciousness.
Interesting. But then what about the folks who say consciousness is, like, fundamentally tied to being biological?
Yeah, that's the other side of the coin. They're like, nope, you can't just program consciousness into a machine. It's something special, unique to living things.
So I guess the big question is, if we could create a truly conscious AI, would we even want to? Like, what are the ethical implications there?
Oh man, where do we even begin? I mean, would a conscious AI have rights? Would we be obligated to treat it like ethically? Would it be considered a person? It's mind-blowing stuff.
Yeah, it's like opening Pandora's box. All these possibilities and all these potential problems, too.
Exactly. And that's why we need to be having these conversations now, before it's too late. Like, how do we balance the potential benefits of AI with the ethical considerations?
Deep stuff.
Yes.
Okay, let's take a breather for a second and get a little more personal. I came across this post on Love of All Wisdom that I thought was really interesting. It's called "The Philosopher Takes the Same Psych Meds as His Dog."
Oh, yeah, I read that one. It's kind of funny, but also pretty profound.
Right, like, here's this philosopher wrestling with insomnia and anxiety, just like the rest of us.
Mm.
And what's even wilder, he ends up taking the same meds as his dog.
It's a good reminder that even the people who think about these big existential questions all day long, they're still human. They struggle with the same stuff we do.
And it also makes you think about, like, how much we actually have in common with other living beings.
Totally. Like, the boundaries between us and them might not be as clear-cut as we think.
So in that vein, I'm curious, has philosophy ever helped you personally in dealing with tough times?
You know, I think it has, in a way. Like, philosophy gives you these tools to examine your own experiences, to make sense of the world, even when it feels like it's falling apart.
It's all about perspective, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And philosophy can help you shift your perspective, reframe your thoughts, and maybe even find some comfort or meaning in the midst of chaos.
Speaking of finding meaning, I found this really beautiful piece on the Marginalian called "How to See the Golden Light," Oliver Sacks in Love.
Ooh, I love Oliver Sacks. What's this one about?
Well, it's about this quote from him where he talks about experiencing the world as if it's bathed in this, like, golden liquid.
Hmm.
And he says there are three ways to see the world like this: being great, crazy, or wildly in love.
That's so Sacks. So poetic and full of wonder.
It really is. And it made me think about, like, the importance of cultivating that sense of awe and appreciation for life, even amidst all the messiness.
Totally. Like, even when things are tough, there's still so much beauty and wonder to be found if we just open ourselves up to it.
Okay, so on a slightly less uplifting note, there's some concerning news coming out of the academic world. Daily News is reporting on a bill that's been introduced in Kansas, and it would basically eliminate tenure for professors at state universities.
Whoa, seriously, that's a big deal.
Yeah, and it's raising a lot of alarm bells about academic freedom. Like, if professors don't have that protection of tenure, they could be punished for expressing unpopular views or pursuing research that, someone in power doesn't like.
That's terrifying. Tenure is like the bedrock of academic freedom. It allows professors to explore controversial ideas, to challenge the status quo without fear of losing their jobs.
Right. And without that freedom, how can we expect to advance knowledge or even just have honest, open discussions about important issues?
Exactly. This kind of bill, it could have a chilling effect on academia. Professors might self-censor or avoid certain topics, and that's not good for anyone.
So even if you're not a professor or a student or directly connected to academia, why should you care about this?
Because universities are, like, vital to a healthy society. They're where we generate new ideas, where we challenge old assumptions, where we train the next generation of thinkers and leaders. And when academic freedom is under attack, it affects all of us.
It's a reminder that we can't take these freedoms for granted. We have to actively defend them.
Absolutely. And that's something we should all be concerned about. It feels like we've covered so much ground today, from fake news to 3D printed guns, and even the possibility of, like, conscious robots. It's a lot to process.
It is, but I think it shows just how relevant philosophy is, even in this crazy modern world we live in.
Totally. Like, We might have fancy new technologies and all these like 21st century problems, but the fundamental questions haven't really changed. What does it mean to be human? How should we live? What's right and wrong? These are questions that philosophers have been grappling with for centuries, and they're still just as important today.
Yeah, it's like no matter how much the world changes, there's still this core set of values and beliefs that we're all trying to figure out.
And that's where philosophy comes in, right? It gives us a framework for thinking about these big questions, even if there aren't always easy answers.
It's about asking those tough questions and being willing to wrestle with
Yeah.
them, even when it's uncomfortable. So, as we wrap up this deep dive, I hope it sparked some of those questions for you,
Yeah, keep those conversations going. Talk to your friends, your family, your colleagues. Share your thoughts, listen to other perspectives.
because that's how we learn and grow,
Right.
by engaging with these ideas and with each other.
Absolutely. And remember, philosophy isn't just for academics. It's for everyone. It's about how we live our lives, how we make decisions, how we understand the world around us.
So keep exploring, keep questioning, keep thinking deeply. That's what makes life interesting.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everyone. We'll catch you next time.